Alex had just moved into a new apartment. It wasn't a big place, but it was perfect for him. Quiet and away from the hustle and bustle of the city. He had always enjoyed a peaceful life. The building was old but well maintained, with narrow hallways and squeaky floors that gave it a certain charm. The first few days were uneventful. Alex spent his time unpacking boxes, setting up his new life, and getting used to the neighborhood. He enjoyed the quiet atmosphere and didn't mind being alone. He had always been the type to keep to himself. But there was something about the apartment complex that felt a little different. It wasn't just the old building or the strange creaks at night. No, it was his neighbor, Zura. She lived right next door. Alex had first noticed her on his second day when he saw her in the hallway. She was tall and slender, with bright blue skin that shimmered in the light. Her eyes were a piercing shade of green, almost glowing, and her hair, or what Alex assumed was hair, was long and white, flowing down her back in delicate strands. It looked almost like silk, but Alex knew better than to make any guesses about what it might actually be. She was clearly different. At first, Alex thought she was just another strange person living in the building. After all, he had heard rumors about aliens and strange visitors in the city, but something about Zira caught his attention. She didn't speak much, and whenever he saw her, she seemed distant, lost in thought. It wasn't like she was trying to hide or avoid people, but there was an air about her, an unspoken distance that made Alex feel like she was from a world far away. Over the next few days, he noticed she was acting even stranger. Zira would walk around the building at odd hours, always with a quick, almost frantic step, her eyes darting from side to side. She was always alone. Alex hadn't seen anyone else with her. He wasn't sure if she was just shy or if there was something else going on. One evening, after a long day of work, Alex decided to go out for a walk. The apartment building was quiet, and he figured it would be a good time to clear his head. As he walked down the hallway, he heard a door open. He turned to find Sarah standing there, her usual blank expression on her face. "Hey," Alex said, smiling a little awkwardly. "How's it going?" Zira stared at him for a moment, her green eyes scanning him up and down, as if she was unsure of what to say. Alex wasn't sure why, but there was something in her gaze that made him feel uneasy. It wasn't that she looked angry or even unfriendly. It was just strange. "I'm fine," she finally replied, her voice soft and almost melodic, though there was a hint of something else in it. Alex nodded, trying to make small talk. "You've been busy. I haven't seen you around much lately." Zira hesitated before answering. "I've been distracted. Anything I can help with?" Alex asked, genuinely wanting to help. He had no idea why, but he felt compelled to ask. Maybe it was just the way she looked, like she was carrying something heavy, something no one else could understand. She looked at him for a long time before answering. "It's nothing," she said quickly, but Alex could tell there was more to it. Her eyes seemed clouded, as though she was hiding something. "Okay," Alex said, deciding not to push. "Well, if you need anything, I'm just next door." Zira gave him a small, almost forced smile before turning back into her apartment and closing the door behind her. For the next few days, Alex couldn't stop thinking about the brief interaction. There was something strange about Zira, something he couldn't quite place. It wasn't just her appearance, though that was certainly unique. It was the way she moved, the way she spoke, and the way she seemed to carry a weight that others couldn't see. Then, one evening, as Alex was heading out to pick up some dinner, he saw her again. This time, Zara was standing in the hallway, her posture tense. She was staring at the wall, her hands clenched tightly at her sides. She looked like she was fighting with herself. "Are you okay?" Alex asked, concerned. Zara turned to him, her face pale. For a moment, she didn't speak, but Alex could see the desperation in her eyes. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "What's going on?" Alex asked, stepping closer. His curiosity was growing, but so was his concern. There was something deeply wrong here, something he couldn't ignore. Zara took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the hallway, as if checking to make sure no one else was nearby. "I'm in mating season," she said in a low voice. "I need a mate, or I will. I will." Her voice trailed off, and Alex felt a chill run down his spine. He had no idea what she meant by that, but the desperation in her voice told him it was something serious. "Mating season?" Alex asked, confused. Zara nodded. "It's important in my culture," she explained, her voice barely audible. "I don't have much time left." Alex stood there, frozen for a moment. He had heard stories about aliens and their strange customs, but this was different. He had no idea how to respond. Zara looked at him, her eyes pleading. "Please," she whispered. "I don't know what else to do." Zara's secret. Alex stood in the hallway, staring at Zara. Her words echoed in his mind. "I need a mate, or I will." The rest of her sentence had faded into silence, leaving a heavy tension in the air. He had never expected to hear something like that from her. Her quiet desperation was almost palpable, making him feel both concerned and uncertain. Zara's eyes were wide, filled with fear, and she looked as if she was about to break down. Her usual calm and distant demeanor had disappeared. Alex had always thought of her as someone who didn't need help, but now, seeing her like this, he couldn't ignore the fact that she was in real trouble. "I don't understand," Alex said, his voice soft but filled with concern. "What do you mean, you need a mate?" Zara glanced around the hallway, as if checking if anyone was listening. She stepped closer to Alex, her movements quick and deliberate. He could feel her anxiety radiating from her, and it made him even more uneasy. "It's a part of my species," she explained, her voice quiet, almost as if she didn't want to say it out loud. "Mating season is critical for my kind. If I don't find a mate by the end of it, I won't survive." Alex's eyes widened. He had never heard of anything like this before. He didn't even know what kind of alien Zara was, but hearing that her life could be at risk if she didn't find a mate made his stomach twist with worry. You won't survive," Alex repeated, trying to understand. He had read about alien species in books and seen movies, but nothing had prepared him for this. Zara nodded slowly, her face pale and strained. "It's the way it works in my culture. Without a mate, I won't be able to fulfill the needs of my body. The energy that comes from a bond is necessary for my survival. Without it, I'll die." Alex felt a shiver run down his spine. He couldn't imagine what it must feel like to know that your life was tied to something so strange and out of your control. He wanted to help, but the idea of being that person, the one who would help Zara survive, was overwhelming. "But I'm just a human," Alex said, his voice cracking a little. He felt awkward saying it, but it was the truth. He didn't know how he could help her. He wasn't sure if he could even be the kind of mate she needed. He didn't even know what that meant. Zara looked at him, her eyes pleading. "That's what makes it different. Humans are unique to us. Your species has qualities that none of us have. Your energy, your strength, your emotions. There's something my people need. You could help me." Alex swallowed hard. He had never felt so unsure of himself in his life. He had never thought of himself as someone special, but Zara was looking at him like he was the answer to her problem. A part of him wanted to run, to avoid the whole situation, but another part of him, something deeper, wanted to help her. "I don't know what to say," Alex admitted. I don't know what you're asking me to do." Zara took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging as if the weight of her situation was too much for her to carry alone. "I don't know what else to do. I've tried everything else. But no one here understands. No one can help me except a human." She paused, her eyes filling with something between hope and sadness. "Please, Alex. I don't want to die." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't want her to die. That much was clear. But the pressure of the situation was heavy, and he had no idea what he was getting into. He felt overwhelmed by Zyra's plea, by the weight of her emotions that seemed to surround him. "Isn't there another way?" Alex asked, his voice soft but desperate. "Can't you go back to where you're from? Wouldn't someone there?" "No," Zyra cut him off sharply, shaking her head. "I'm not from here, Alex. I don't have a home to go back to. This is it. This is my only chance." Alex could see that she wasn't lying. The fear in her eyes was too real. He didn't know what it meant for him to be her mate. He didn't understand her culture, didn't know how this bond was supposed to work. But one thing was clear. She was asking him for help, and if he didn't help, she might not survive. He took a step back, his mind racing. "I don't know if I can. I don't know if I'm the right person for this." Zyra's face fell, and for a moment, Alex thought she might cry. But she held herself together, wiping her eyes quickly. "Please, Alex. You don't have to love me. You don't even have to like me. But if you don't help me, I'll die. And if you can't do it, I'll have to face the consequences alone." The words hung in the air like a weight, pressing down on Alex's chest. He felt the responsibility in that moment, the power he held over Zyra's life. It was too much to ignore. "I can't just turn my back on you," Alex said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "I'll help you. But I don't know what that means for me. I don't know what this bond will do." Zyra nodded gratefully, her expression softening. "Thank you, Alex," she whispered. "You don't know how much this means to me." Alex stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision he had just made. He had no idea what he was getting into, but one thing was certain: his life was never going to be the same again. Growing closer. In the days that followed, Alex found himself spending more and more time with Zyra. It wasn't planned. It just happened. After their conversation in the hallway, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he had made the right choice. He had agreed to help her, and now he couldn't walk away. He felt a strange pull toward her, a mix of curiosity, concern, and something else he couldn't quite name. Zyra seemed more at ease around him, though she still carried an air of sadness and urgency. She had told him that mating season for her kind was different from what he might think. It wasn't just about physical attraction. It was about survival, a deep, almost spiritual bond that was necessary for her species. She had explained that it wasn't something that could be forced, but the connection between them had to happen naturally, and it had to happen soon. "I'm not asking you for love, Alex," she told him one evening as they sat on the balcony of her apartment. "I just need the bond to form. I need you to help me survive." Alex nodded, though the thought of what he was agreeing to still made his mind spin. He wasn't sure how to form such a bond, let alone what it would mean for him, but Zyra's need was clear, and he couldn't turn away. The more they spoke, the more Alex learned about her world. Zyra would sometimes share bits and pieces of her life before coming to Earth, telling him about the stars she had seen, the planets she had visited, and the strange customs of her people. The more Alex listened, the more he realized how much he didn't know about the universe beyond Earth. But there was one thing that became clear to him. Zyra wasn't like any alien he had imagined. She wasn't cold or distant, as he had first thought. She had a vulnerability about her, a kindness that made her seem more human than alien. And as the days passed, Alex found himself looking forward to their conversations. On a late afternoon, Zyra invited Alex to dinner. She had cooked something that smelled unfamiliar but delicious. The moment Alex stepped into her apartment, he could feel the change. Her apartment, once cold and impersonal, now felt warmer, more lived in. There were soft lights around the room, and a quiet, peaceful atmosphere filled the space. "Please, sit," Zyra said, gesturing toward the small dining table she had set up. She was smiling now, her face softer, less burdened. "I hope you like it." Alex smiled back, trying to push aside his nervousness. "I'm sure it'll be great," he said, sitting down. The smell in the air was pleasant, almost intoxicating, though he couldn't place exactly what it was. He watched her move gracefully around the room, setting the food in front of him. It wasn't long before they began to eat, and the silence between them didn't feel awkward. Zira spoke a little more about her culture, and Alex shared stories from his life. He found himself enjoying her company more than he expected, laughing at the small jokes she made, and finding her perspective on things surprisingly similar to his own. As they ate, Alex noticed the way she looked at him, almost like she was studying him. She didn't speak much about the bond, but her eyes lingered on him with a softness that made him feel both curious and protective. "Alex," Zira said quietly, her voice suddenly serious. "I'm glad you're here. I've never felt this comfortable with anyone before." Alex's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected her to say that. He had assumed that she saw him as a lifeline, a means of survival. But now, hearing her words, he realized that it was more than that. She had come to rely on him in ways he hadn't imagined. She was trusting him with her life, and that trust wasn't something he could take lightly. "I'm glad I'm here too," Alex said, his voice low and sincere. "I don't really understand everything, but I want to help." Zira's smile was gentle, and for the first time, Alex saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. It was as if the weight of the world was starting to lift, just a little. The tension that had surrounded her in the past few days seemed to ease. For the next few days, their relationship grew more comfortable. They spent time talking, eating together, and even going for walks around the neighborhood. Alex learned more about her past, her people, and the things that had shaped her into who she was. And in return, Zira listened to him, learning about Earth and the life he had left behind. There were moments when Alex felt the strange pull between them, a quiet connection that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. But he wasn't sure if it was the bond she needed, or if it was something else entirely. There were moments when their eyes would meet, and he could almost feel the intensity of her gaze, but neither of them spoke about it. It was as if they were both afraid to acknowledge what was happening. But the truth was, Alex was beginning to care for her. There was no denying it. He cared about her well-being, and he cared about her as a person. And while he wasn't sure what would happen between them, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't just walk away from her now. Zira, for her part, seemed to be slowly letting her guard down. Her smiles were more frequent, and she was starting to open up about her fears and doubts. She had been so alone for so long, so used to handling things on her own. But now, with Alex by her side, she was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to face everything alone. "I don't know what I would have done without you, Alex," Zira admitted one evening as they sat together on the balcony, watching the sunset. "I was scared before, but now, with you here, I feel like I have hope." Alex turned to her, a soft smile crossing his face. He didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. Agreeing to help. The days were getting warmer as spring settled in, and Alex couldn't stop thinking about Zira. Ever since that first conversation in the hallway, things between them had changed. They were growing closer, and every moment spent with her made him realize just how deep her struggle went. She needed him, not just for the bond that could save her life, but for something deeper, something that neither of them had expected. Zira had never asked for love, never demanded anything more than what was necessary to survive. But the longer Alex spent with her, the more he understood how serious her situation really was. The bond she was looking for wasn't just a physical connection. It was something spiritual, something that would give her strength. He had no idea how such a bond could work, but one thing was clear. Zira was depending on him, and he couldn't turn his back on her. One evening, after another quiet dinner together, Zira seemed quieter than usual. Alex noticed how she picked at her food, her eyes not meeting his. The tension between them was growing, though neither of them said anything about it. They both knew the time had come for a decision. "Zira," Alex began, his voice soft but serious. "We need to talk." She looked up at him, her eyes tired but attentive. "About what?" "I've been thinking a lot about everything," Alex said, leaning forward. "About the bond, about your culture, and what you need from me. And I think I'm ready to help you. I've been scared, not really knowing what it all means, but I can't just stand by while you're suffering." Zira's eyes widened, a mix of hope and disbelief crossing her face. "You mean it? You'll help me?" Alex nodded. "Yes. I want to help you, Zira. I don't fully understand what this bond is, but I know you need it to survive. And I want to be the one to help you get it." Zira blinked, her face softening as relief washed over her. She hadn't realized how much she had been holding back until now. The fear of rejection, the worry that Alex wouldn't understand or would walk away. It had all been weighing on her. But now, hearing his words, she felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in days. I don't know how to thank you," Zira whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "I've been so scared, Alex. Scared that I would be alone in this. I didn't want to force you into something you didn't want. But now you're here, and you're willing to help. It means more than you could ever know." Alex reached across the table, his hand gently touching hers. "You don't have to thank me. I made the decision because it's the right thing to do, and I can't just leave you to face this alone." Zira held his gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never imagined that a human, someone so different from her, could be so kind, so willing to step in when things seemed impossible. She had expected rejection, or at best, sympathy. But Alex wasn't just offering her help. He was offering his trust, his time, and a part of himself she hadn't expected to find. "Thank you, Alex," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I won't forget this." Alex smiled softly. He wasn't sure what would come next. He didn't know how this bond would work or what it would mean for him. But one thing was clear. He was now part of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. As they sat together in silence, the evening sky darkening around them, Alex's mind raced. He wasn't sure what the future held. Would he really be able to form a bond with Zira? Would he be able to help her the way she needed? And if he did, what would happen to their relationship after that? Zira seemed to sense his unease, and she gently squeezed his hand. "Don't worry, Alex," she said softly. "I know this is new for both of us, but we'll take it one step at a time. I trust you." Her words were simple, but they struck Alex in a way that made him realize how deeply this would affect both of them. He had agreed to help Zira, yes, but he was about to step into a world he didn't fully understand. The bond she needed wasn't just a casual thing. It would change them both, forever. "Okay," Alex said, his voice firm but kind. "One step at a time." Zira smiled, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You're a good person, Alex. I hope you know that." Alex smiled back, though the weight of what was to come still hung in the air. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this new chapter, but he knew that he couldn't turn back now. The next few days were filled with quiet conversations about what would happen next. Zira explained more about her species, how the bond formed, and what would happen if they succeeded. She told him that it wasn't just about physical contact. It was about a deep connection that would flow between them, something that would connect their souls in a way that nothing else could. As the days passed, Alex tried to wrap his mind around it all. He still didn't understand everything. But the more he learned about Zira and her people, the more he saw how much they needed each other. She needed him to survive, yes, but somewhere along the way, Alex had started to need her too. They weren't just two beings from different worlds anymore. They were two people, facing something that neither of them had expected. And though they didn't know what would happen next, they knew that they were no longer alone. Unexpected changes. The days after Alex's decision to help Zira were filled with uncertainty. Both of them had agreed that they would take things one step at a time, but the feeling of change was already in the air. It was as if the decision they had made together was slowly beginning to take root, and both Alex and Zira could feel it. Zira had explained to Alex that the bond between them wouldn't be an easy one. It wasn't something that could be forced. It had to happen naturally, over time. But Alex could already feel that something between them was shifting. There were moments when their hands brushed, moments when their eyes met and held longer than they should. He couldn't explain it, but there was a connection between them, a growing pull that neither of them could ignore. One morning, Alex woke up to find that the world outside his window felt different. The air felt heavier, as if it was filled with an energy that was unfamiliar to him. He couldn't explain it, but he felt more aware of everything. His senses seemed sharper, his heart beating faster. The feeling of change was there, and it wasn't just in his mind. When he went to Zira's apartment later that morning, she looked different too. Her skin seemed to glow in the soft light that streamed through the windows. And her eyes were deeper, more intense. There was something in her gaze that made Alex feel as if she was seeing him in a way that was different from before. "Good morning, Alex," Zira said, her voice soft but warm. There was a new confidence in her tone, a calmness that Alex hadn't noticed before. "Morning," Alex replied, his voice uncertain. "Are you okay?" Zira smiled, though it wasn't a smile he recognized fully. It was a smile that seemed to come from somewhere deeper, somewhere inside of her that he hadn't seen before. "I'm more than okay," she said. "I think the bond is beginning to form." Alex felt a chill run through him. "Already?" he asked, surprised. He hadn't expected it to happen so soon. Zira nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "It's not something I can explain, Alex, but I can feel it. The connection between us, it's growing." Alex didn't know how to respond. He had expected things to move slowly, one step at a time. But it seemed like everything was happening faster than either of them had planned. He could feel the change too, though he wasn't sure what it meant. There was something undeniable about the pull between them, something that was making everything feel different. As the days passed, the changes became more noticeable. Alex began to feel strange in his own skin. It wasn't that he was uncomfortable. It was more like he was becoming more aware of himself, more in tune with his emotions. His feelings for Zira were growing stronger, more complicated. He wasn't sure if it was the bond forming, or if it was just his own heart, but he couldn't deny it. He was starting to care for her more deeply. Zira, too, seemed to be changing. She was more focused, more confident. She carried herself with a quiet strength that Alex hadn't seen before. And it wasn't just her confidence. It was something deeper, something that seemed to radiate from within her. There were moments when she would look at him, and it was as if she was seeing him in a way that went beyond just his physical presence. It was as if she was seeing into his very soul. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Zira stood up and walked toward the window. The setting sun cast a warm glow over her, and Alex watched her with a mixture of fascination and uncertainty. There was something about her now that felt different. She seemed so distant, yet so close at the same time. Her presence filled the room, and Alex felt his heart race. "I don't know what's happening, Alex," Zira said, her voice low. "But I can feel the change in me. I think the bond is stronger now, and it's changing us both." Alex didn't know how to respond. He could feel it too, but it was overwhelming. The pull between them was becoming harder to ignore, and it was making him question everything he thought he knew. He had agreed to help her, yes, but he wasn't sure what that meant for him anymore. "I don't know what to do," Alex admitted. "This feels like it's happening too fast." Zira turned to face him, her eyes filled with understanding. "I know," she said softly. "It's happening faster than either of us expected. But the bond isn't just about survival. It's about something deeper. It's about connecting, about becoming one." Alex felt a shiver run down his spine. Her words hit him in a way he hadn't expected. Becoming one. Was that really what was happening? Was this bond something that could truly bring them together in a way that was beyond just the physical? "I don't want to rush you, Zira," Alex said, his voice filled with hesitation. But I'm scared. I don't know what this bond will mean for us. I don't know if I'm ready for something like that. Zira smiled gently, stepping closer to him. It's okay to be scared. I'm scared too. But this is something we can't ignore. The bond is forming, and it's changing us both. It's something we have to face together. As she spoke, Alex could feel the energy between them shift again. The air seemed thicker, charged with an energy that was both exciting and terrifying. Zyra's presence felt more powerful than ever before, and Alex could feel his own emotions becoming more intense. I don't know where this is going, Zyra, Alex said quietly, his voice trembling slightly. But I want to try. I want to understand this, whatever it is. Zyra's smile widened, and for a moment, Alex saw a glimmer of something in her eyes, something that told him they were both in this together. Then let's take this one step at a time, Alex, together. And with those words, something shifted. The bond between them was no longer just a distant idea. It was real, and it was changing both of them in ways they couldn't fully understand. But one thing was certain. Nothing between them would ever be the same again. Deeper connections. The days after their conversation felt like they were living in a world that had changed overnight. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something important was happening between him and Zyra, something he couldn't explain but could feel deep inside. It was as if the bond they had agreed to form was already shifting, already pulling them closer together. At first, it was subtle. Little things, like the way Zyra looked at him, the way they both seemed to instinctively reach for each other's hands when they were near. But as the days went by, the connection between them grew stronger, undeniable. Alex didn't know if it was the bond forming or something else entirely, but one thing was for sure. It was changing him. It was changing them both. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Alex found himself standing by the window, looking out into the darkening sky. The stars twinkled above, and the soft hum of the city outside seemed distant, almost peaceful. Zyra stood beside him, her presence comforting and steady. It wasn't the first time they had shared a moment like this, but tonight, there was something different in the air. I've been thinking about what you said, Alex began, his voice quiet, unsure of how to say what was on his mind. About becoming one. I didn't fully understand it before, but now, I think I'm starting to. Zyra turned to face him, her eyes glowing softly in the dim light. It's not something that happens quickly, Alex. It's a gradual process. The connection between us, it's growing stronger with every moment we spend together. Alex nodded slowly, taking in her words. I feel it too. It's like, I'm more aware of you, of everything around me, even. My senses are sharper. My emotions feel more intense. It's like something is waking up inside me. Zyra smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. It's the bond, Alex. It's changing both of us. It's making us more in tune with each other, with everything around us. But it's also making us more aware of ourselves, our true selves. Alex took a deep breath. The idea of the bond connecting them in such a deep, spiritual way was still a bit overwhelming. But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. He had felt the change in himself. He had felt the way Zyra's presence had started to affect him. It was like they were becoming more attuned to each other's thoughts, each other's feelings. Zyra's voice broke through his thoughts. It's not just about being together, Alex. It's about understanding each other. About seeing each other for who we really are, without fear, without hesitation. It's about trust. Alex turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. And do you trust me? He asked, the question hanging in the air between them. Zyra's gaze softened, and she nodded. I do, Alex. I trust you more than I've trusted anyone. This bond isn't just about survival. It's about something deeper. And I trust you to help me see it through. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had always thought of trust as something that took time to build, but with Zyra, it felt different. There was a rawness to it, a deep sense of honesty that he couldn't explain. And now, as they stood together, with the bond beginning to form between them, he realized just how much he was starting to trust her too. "I don't know what will happen next, Zyra," Alex said softly, his voice almost a whisper. "But I want to be here. I want to understand what's happening to us. I want to see this through with you." Zyra's eyes glistened as she took a step closer to him. "And you will, Alex. We'll figure this out together. The bond is changing us both, but that's not a bad thing. It's making us stronger, more connected, and it's giving us a chance to understand each other in a way that no one else could." Alex reached out, gently taking her hand in his. As soon as their skin touched, he felt the spark, the pull, the energy between them. It was subtle, but undeniable. He felt her warmth, her heartbeat, her emotions flooding his senses. And for the first time, he understood what Zyra meant by becoming one. It wasn't just about being physically close. It was about being emotionally, mentally, and spiritually connected. It was about sharing everything, even the things they were afraid to admit. He squeezed her hand gently. "This is happening faster than I expected," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Zyra nodded, her gaze softening. "I know, but that's how these things work sometimes. The bond doesn't wait for you to be ready. It just happens when it's meant to." As they stood together, the connection between them deepened. Alex could feel the way Zyra's thoughts seemed to echo in his own mind, like they were linked on a level that was beyond words. It was overwhelming, yet comforting. He could sense her fears, her hopes, and her needs in a way he had never felt with anyone before. Zyra turned to him, her face inches from his. "Alex," she said softly, "this bond, it's not just about us. It's about something bigger, something that we can't even fully understand yet. But I know that together, we can face it." Alex took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He and Zyra were no longer just two individuals from different worlds. They were something more. And together, they would face whatever challenges came their way. As they stood there, the night growing darker around them, Alex realized that they were no longer just two people thrown together by fate. They were becoming something new, something stronger. And even though the road ahead was unclear, one thing was certain. They were in this together. A new beginning. The days that followed felt like the start of something new, something that Alex couldn't quite put into words. The bond between him and Zyra was stronger now, more real than ever. It was no longer just a strange connection. It had become a part of both of them. They had shared their fears, their hopes, and now they were learning to trust each other in ways they never imagined. It was a quiet morning when everything finally clicked. Alex had woken up early, like he often did, and stood by the window, watching the sun slowly rise over the city. He had always enjoyed these quiet moments, but today something felt different. The air seemed clearer, and there was a feeling of peace that settled over him, as if everything was falling into place. Zyra appeared behind him, her presence calm and steady. He didn't need to turn around to know she was there. He could feel her, the bond making them aware of each other even when they were apart. "I've been thinking," Zyra said softly, her voice almost lost in the quiet morning. "About everything. About the bond. About us." Alex turned to face her, his heart beating a little faster. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his voice gentle, unsure of where this conversation might go.